All right, we're here for the implementation lab on the ACT phase for Momentum System, November 5th, 2024. Great to see everybody here. And I'm excited to get started. So Elizabeth is signing in, so I'm going to wait just a second here to do my spiel. How's everybody doing? Okay under the circumstances?
I was hoping to make it to the lesson brief this morning, and I ended up getting stuck talking to other parents at the kids' school during drop off with all the election stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to be obsessing everybody today.
I mean, for reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So first thing I want to say is for all my Americans here, like big hugs. Like this is very the scary day. And I know that's true also. Like my French friends wrote me this morning saying like, oh my gosh, good luck today. Fingers crossed. So it's international. And yeah, it's anyway, so anybody want to say anything about that? Feel free. Like, the doors are open. We don't need to like, shut that down or anything. So if you want to talk about it, feel free. But I'm just going to go in with the plan and we'll see where things go. So the plan for today is to go through the kind of high level overview of the ACT phase. And I'm kind of interested actually in asking you guys a couple of questions about this because one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in terms of the Creative Focus workshop is how there are, I mean, there are four phases, right? And so there are four phases. There are four different things we do. But also there's sort of like a big area of making sort of understanding our relationship with our projects and making big decisions about things, sort of putting structures in place, generally strategically addressing, overwhelm, indecisiveness, distraction, whatever. Then there's let's finish a project. There's like actually let's do the thing. And they're obviously intimately related and you need one for the other and all that stuff. But they are um, two different ways that we need to engage with our work life. And I do certainly see a major difference in how people engage, like in the course, that people get really excited about the beginning of the course and they get here and they're like, oh, and I don't get a lot of people going through the ACT phase in detail. Which is funny because when I teach it to like my undergrads, for example, when I used to do this class for them, I would mostly focus on this. Like this is what we were mostly doing. And yes, we had to make decisions about what the project was, but like this is the actually like how do you lay it out and get it done? And when I'm working with clients like you all in a group like this, we often talk a lot about this kind of stuff. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. If you have any thoughts about that, I'd be really interested to hear your take on that and your feedback on that. Um,
I do have thoughts.
yeah,
Whenever you're ready for
go
that, if you
ahead. Go
want to just
ahead.
get
Yeah.
into the lesson. Well, I was just thinking you were talking about undergrads, and I think that a big difference between your undergrads and us is your undergrads are doing it with the external accountability and the external motivation of completing a class and getting a grade. Whereas we have to be, for the most part, much more intrinsically motivated in the projects that we're doing. So
Agreed.
I think that that's a big difference.
Although I would like to say that this class that I used to teach this class, which is it is they have to come up with their own project and see it all the way through. I'm not giving them a project. They're creating the project. So it's
Oh, that's
much more
good practice.
similar to what you do but they do get a grade, but I make clear from the beginning, like I'm not actually grading them on, like I am grading them on the work, but it's more like, are they learning and progressing and basically doing what we're doing? Like, are they doing this?
Mhm.
So it isn't a one-to-one. And in general, they're in a
Mm.
structure where there are grades and semesters and deadlines, and they're like on that train. And so that all works. But the kind of work they need to be doing as art students is self-generated work in their studio to create for shows, for exhibitions at the end of the year. And they're not good at that, because it doesn't have grades and stuff. And so what I was trying to do with that course was to build that transition.
Man, I wish I'd had that. I wish I'd had that in undergraduate and graduate school for that matter.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about where you said that the ACT phase, that's kind of where folks like us can get hung up a little. And I think you're right. I think that there are almost two stages there where you have the first stage of time management and project management practices. And then you have the second stage of actually doing the thing, taking the action.
Yeah, and second stage takes a long time, right? So
Mhm.
the other thing is that in the ACT phase of your project, you could be in the ACT phase for years. Whereas in
Mhm.
the ACT phase of the course, you're doing it in a couple days. So like in the core, like it's not a perfect mesh, that you I'm asking you to design some things and come up with whatever. That's acting in the course, but it's not executing your entire project. But I think sometimes people feel like they have to have executed the entire project
Um,
in order to move on, you know. Yeah.
yeah.
Garima. Yeah.
So, I don't know because I was already tracking my time and trying to sort of like, reassign the puzzle pieces. When I came to act phase, actually, I mean, I did everything. I mean, I made a plan, like you said, I made a project plan
Mhm.
and I have acted. I mean, I made my page, I have shared with few people who are actually going to share it with their tribe. And now I'm waiting. I mean, I just did that yesterday. So
Great.
it all actually, I mean, maybe it was just on my, I knew exactly what I needed to do. So once I put those, I made the project plan, like you had said, and then within that project plan, I just started acting, basically. I mean, it just felt easier to start acting. And then the only thing that came up was, I think, the mental block, a bit of a bit of fear. Like, wow,
Mhm.
I know that people will start coming. I mean, so. But then I just,
Yeah.
put that aside, sent like few emails, few Facebook, connected with friends who what you wanted me to work with them. So that's all done. So my website is live now with my coaching page. So
Wow, fantastic.
yeah.
Congrats. Yay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is like, yes, there are various kinds of blocks that'll come up around ACT, and one of those things is, oh, and now it's real. What? Like that's scary, right? That's the transition from the collect decide to like it becomes tangible, and like, what if it doesn't work, or what if it does work, or whatever, so all those things. Yeah, but good for you. That's awesome. Lisbeth, what did you want to add?
Uh, well, I have a question because I might have been asleep at the wheel here, but probably. I realized I have these blocks, and sometimes and in the weekend I get completely overwhelmed. I'm fine now, but I have not written my project plan, and I really want to, but I simply don't know what tool to use. I mean, I started
Okay, well,
Googling,
let's
I
talk
started
about that. We'll
looking.
talk about that. Let's go
Oh,
through the
okay,
actual
have I missed
material,
something?
and let's make sure to talk about tools.
Okay, because then I mean this may sound so stupid, but what's the best way to enter the autonomous our resource page? What's the best way to gather things in Google Docs in a folder? I cannot find the folder icon. It's driving me crazy. And so I can't delete other folders and I can't make a folder. I know it's very simple. Then I Google how to find your Google folder. Then I found a recipe for like how to remove old stuff and make room. And for me, mentally, this is very symbolic. I mean, I need to get that stuff out of there to a folder. And then I've been rearranging My office space, you might notice there's a different background now.
Uh-huh.
And I'm still moving furniture around. And somehow it's really helping me prepare to what I'm starting to envision. But I'm such, I don't know, my brain fog is like so intense that I would just really like, what are these tools? Where are they? It would really help me immensely. So that I
Yeah, I
don't
mean, I
start
think that
spinning my
the
wheels
tools that
with
we
this other stuff.
literally use inside the Creative Focus workshop are Google Docs. And that's what you're talking about, I think. That's like the
Yeah, yeah.
worksheets.
Then I have, because
Docs.
I end up having all these docs that are like free floating. I mean, I
Yeah.
want to
And what
compile
I've
them.
done with the Google Docs is I have made them they all are titled CFW and then the name of the phase and then the title so that when you go to your drive folder, your main drive folder, they should all sort in order. So you see CFW, CFW,
Yeah, then of
CFW,
course I
see them all in
rename
one
them,
place.
but that's me. Yeah.
So that's, one way to like make sure that they, even if you don't put them in a folder, they're all in one like block in
Right,
your visually in your drive.
right.
And just quickly to make a folder, when you look at your Google Drive up on the top left there, there's a button that says new. And if you click that, you can drag down because new folder and you can create a new folder. And when you do
Okay.
that, once you create the new folder, you can name it and then you can highlight a bunch of things and drag them to the folder. Or you can use the little move icon, which is like a little folder with an arrow in it,
Yeah.
which is at the top. So
Okay.
I'm
And
going to
there's
demo that in
another
a
way
few
of
minutes if
deleting
you
them.
want.
I think it's a security feature. So you have to go in a different way and like do there's a different way of going in if you're going to delete folders, apparently. But I have yet to do that.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, if they're yours, you can delete them, but yeah. Okay, so let's jump in.
Thank you.
The main two things in the ACT phase, like the big sort of overarching ideas I want to get at are the idea of the flexible container and the idea of the project path. So the flexible container is a conceptual structure that is really about like how are we going to think about and approach any kind of planning we do. And this is a term I came up with not that long ago, but I've really like come to love it. I love the idea of flexible container, this idea of something that has these kinds of like resilient but strong sides that kind of keeps us where we want to be, that we can rely on them, but they are flexible. That like when things happen, when something, like when we have election anxiety, whatever it is, like we have a way to, you know, tack and be agile and move the plan instead of feeling locked into, this one kind of way. And a lot of the tools we've talked about already are very much for that, right? So things like using themes for your week and then switching out a theme for a different theme or a template for a different template based on your physical needs, for example, or whether like if there's some family member who needs you on a regular basis, having a template for a day when you take care of that person versus when you don't, are ways to sort of like implement this idea of flexible container more easily and more fully so that you are like you've pre-forgiven yourself for things being not on track, in addition to pre-deciding what that's going to look like. So the looking at my list here of things I want to say. Give me just a second. The project path then is the actual kind of road mapping. It's like so you have the idea of the flexible container, you have this concept of like how we need to both keep on track and also give ourselves space to be human. But in order to keep on track, we need some like actual things to do and like kind of know how those things lay out. And so I'm offering essentially two different ways of designing a project path. Project path is like getting from here to the end. It's just a visual image. It's a path. You're going to be going along it. It may be a curvy path. It may be a straight path, but you're going to be moving along a path towards some destination, which is the outcome that you imagine for your project. The outcome even could change. Like you could take a different fork in the road and end up somewhere else, but it's still a path. And there are two different ways that I look at creating a project path and they map to the kind of project it is. One is planning backward, where you have a specific goal, and particularly a time-based goal. And this, I recommend hard planning backward when you have a hard external deadline, which is rare. But when you do, like that's the way to do it. Like if you need to hit this deadline, taxes are due on April 15th, work backwards, like work your way backwards to what you need to prepare when, like when do you have to get it to your accountant? When do you have to whatever? Those are really strict backward planning projects. And it's important to recognize that those are not super flexible. Like what needs to flex in that container is other stuff. If you know you have something that's got a specific deadline and you got a milestone, you got to hit it in order to get to the next thing. When you need flex because of human things that happen and life things that happen, other stuff needs to flex. That's the thing that needs to stay on track. But that kind of project is exceedingly rare, especially when you work for yourself. Like we make up deadlines all the time, but the deadlines are not that real. And they're more real or less real depending on, what's happening. Like I've had deadlines that have to do with like, in order to finish this program by X date, I need to launch it by X date, which means I need to prepare by X date. That's a backwards plan. But like, okay, what if the whole thing shifts up 2 months? Is that going to kill me? Is that okay? Like there's a little bit of flex built into that. And other things are like, boy, I've been thinking about doing a summit, like doing a, conference for 18 months. And it just keeps sliding because I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. Now, I think I probably will do it in the spring, but, I thought I was going to do it last spring, and I was like, you know what? Capacity is what it is. It moves. So there's different ways of thinking about that. Still, though, and then there's forward planning. So forward planning is basically habits, practices, just keeping on track with something and wanting to do it and just continue to do it. And so everybody here had at least one thing you were working on that's a forward plan that does not have deadlines, may have milestones at some point. Like there may be like, Jess, you're working on a book. There are going to be milestones in that book. But the main thing is just to keep the practice going and reach the milestones when you reach them. And so, you're going to be tempted as you get closer to set deadlines and work harder, but it may make more sense to just stick to the pattern and just keep going with the pattern. You have to decide at that point. But there's plenty of other things that literally don't have any deadlines. Like I want to have a writing practice that's a daily practice. That's forever, So you need to have a flexible container for that too, because there may be days when you can't. And so what are you going to do instead? And, make sure that you have sort of ways to deal with that built in. But it is inherently like a flexible, an ongoing thing that is a forward plan. Now, the most common thing we need to deal with, though, is a mix between the both, where, as I said, many of our plans and projects, they have internal deadlines of some kind that are either more flexible or less flexible, depending on how tied they are to real things. I gave you examples, right? One is like, there's like, say in my life, things get really crazy around now in my family, not because of like there's holidays coming, but mine come earlier because my birthday is next week, then my daughter's birthday, then Thanksgiving, then my daughter's birthday, then Christmas and New Year's and whatever. So we have like all of it lined up. So I try to front load the fall so that I'm not like creating new things from like mid-November on, which is earlier than most people need to think about it. Can it move? Yes. Does it move? Yes. But that's a pretty, there's real stuff going on there that is not movable. And so whatever, versus this summit where I'm like, okay, 3 months, push it. I don't care. I gotta live. So there's some of these internal deadlines are tied to more real things and other things are not. But when there is an outcome to the project, like the summit, like when it runs, like it's a thing. It will be some live things. There will be people coming in. I will be dealing with lots of customer requests. I will be doing live events. I'll be doing all this stuff, right? So that's a real end point. And then what I need to do in order to get there is work backwards. When do I have to have the speakers in? When do I have to have the emails done? When do I have to have all this stuff done? Now I bought a course to help me with this. But the point is that there's major phases of work along this project path that all need to get locked into a calendar. And up to a certain point, I can just kick it to the next season. Like I don't, there's still a way to move it. Now, at some point, it's locked in. It's been advertised. I've got speakers expecting something. Like it becomes a real deadline. But for a period of time, it's very flexible still. So there's this, what I call a soft backwards plan, which is mostly what we do. Most of what we do here is trying to combine elements of this forward planning. It's a practice. We show up, we keep going, we chip away at this thing. It happens when it happens versus there's a deadline at the end and we really need to hit these milestones on days, specific days. So trying to blend those things. That's the flexible container, right? And that's, I think, why all this project planning and task management stuff that's out in the world is so unrealistic and so hard to deal with, because it doesn't acknowledge that. It doesn't acknowledge A, that our deadlines are fake, and B, that life happens. That those are the two things I'm trying to deal with, while also allowing us to be ambitious and try to hit big goals and do stuff we care about and finish and ship. So you get to put those things together, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. That's the big picture. The small picture is, how do we do that? So the granular picture of this is that I imagine everybody here, correct me if I'm wrong, has some kind of task management system already. You have checklists, you've got a piece of paper, you've got Post-it notes, you've got a journal where you stick stuff, you got something, right, to remind yourself of things. You may need to upgrade. There may be something about this system that is not working for you and you need to look at it and upgrade it. There's a lesson in the ACT phase that's about that, essentially. And what I've developed is this 4-step process for looking at any system that you're trying to upgrade. So your calendar system, broken, not working, you're not showing up for stuff on time. Do the 4-step process on it, figure out why you're not showing up for stuff on time. It's essentially a way of, have you guys heard of the 5 whys? The 5 whys is a process that was developed by Toyota, of all things, in Japan to figure out, like, to solve problems, basically. And so if there's a problem, like the production line is stopping, it's like slowing down at this one spot repeatedly for the cars. Why is that? Well, because we don't have this part in our hands. Why don't we have the part in our hands? Well, because it comes from this other place over here and it takes 15 minutes to get there. Well, why is it over there? Well, because that's where we built it. Well, why don't we put it over here? So you figure out a way by just asking why repeatedly to get to a root cause of a problem. And so it's not the same thing, but it's kind of related to that, where basically I'm asking you with the 4 steps to say, like, okay, first of all, what do you do now? Define what you do now. So if you have a task management system, which is, write it on the back of my hand, that's your system now. It is a system. It's not particularly functional. Like if you wash your hands, that's not great. Which you should wash your hands. So that is great, but don't wash off the thing on your, anyway. Maybe you need to move it up and it's on your arm and not on your hand. That's your adaptation. But the point is, like, you have some way of remembering stuff, even if it's just like I churn it over in my head every 15 minutes. Like I find myself going through the list every 15 minutes. Then what's working about that? Well, when I look at my hand, I remember, like it's in front of me, so I see it, or like it's going through my head, so I'm remembering these important things. Well, where does it not work? That's step 3, or part of step 2 is like, where is it not working? Well, I washed my hand, it got blurry and I couldn't tell what it was. Or, I'm spending so much time processing this stuff in my head that it's, making me crazy. What's one thing, what would your dream system be? Well, my dream system is that I have like my everything in the list and like it all, reminds me and it pops up in front of my face, like in my glasses and da, 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 da. whatever, right? And then you say like, well, what's one part that I want to improve out of this thing, like out of what's actually happening? Because if you try to just dump your old system and adopt a new one, it's not going to stick because it's not going to be like what you do. So maybe instead of writing it on your hand, you write it on like a note that's like pinned to the front of your phone or something like that. Like you write it somewhere where it's not going to get washed off, but you are going to see it all the time. And that's like one little step to take. And when you're like, that's annoying to have it on my phone, well, what if I did it here? Like, so you can kind of like bit by bit move your system to something else. So if you have issues with time with task management, that's what I would say. The other thing I would say is top threes with your task management, like putting those two things together, super important, because the biggest problem I see with task management is not that people don't have a system at all, but there's too much shit in it. Take it out, put it out of your eyesight. Do not look at it all the time. Have some way to have, here's what's important now in the next 3 days, tops. The rest of this stuff is in a holding pen. It's in a green room. It's waiting its turn. And I have a way to go back and look at that because I do my top threes, right? So that's the sort of relationship, between those things that allows you to put things out of your view so that you're not constantly trying to, relitigate what you're supposed to be doing on a given day because it's not in front of you. It's just not occurring to you. The bigger problem that I encountered, because task management became that part of it, I didn't learn for way too long, getting it out of my sight, right? But the task management of just like keeping stuff somewhere out of my head, I mastered many, many, many years ago. And it was incredibly helpful to me to use. I used Getting Things Done, the David Allen book, and this whole thing of like a brain dump and like life audit and whatever, and like put everything in a system. He doesn't call it that, call it something else. But anyway, the point being like get it out of your head and into a system and it's all in one place. I did that. It was transformational. So, because I stopped thinking about it stuff all the time, I stopped ruminating all the time and like, trying to keep it all in my head. But here's the problem. Number one, it fools you into thinking that you can do all the things if you're not making decisions using a top three kind of, style decision-making process. And number two, you can get stuck in the weeds. You look at all the little stuff and you lose the view of the big picture. This is something I've struggled with forever, still do. My proposed solution to this, and this is the piece that is the milestone goal for you all for, earning another coaching call, is to create a project tracker. And the project tracker is it's not a task management system. It's a way of looking at the path, the whole thing. Now, you may only look at, if you have a big project in front of you, you may only have a project tracker of the phase you're in, not the whole thing, because you don't want to get overwhelmed, right? So it may not be something where you have like, this is a 3-year project. Let me put the whole 3 years, because you don't know what's going to happen. Things could change. You just want to look at what's in front of you, but you want to look at sort of like a, say, a 2 to 3 month arc of what's going to happen and what you want to do in this project, and have it in some form where you can regularly kind of draw the connections between this project that's happening and your daily actions. And that's where it gets really tricky. That's really complicated. And I don't think there are many systems, like digital systems out there that handle this at all. I have created my own personal systems in Notion where I have like a weekly page and daily pages and also a quarterly page. And I have processes that I go through to do like weekly review, do daily check-ins, and I do quarterly check-ins. And that's when that's when I go actively and draw down from the project plan into the days, into the week. That's my solution for it. So if I were to turn in like a project tracker to me, it would be like a screenshot, I guess, of my Notion board saying like, this is, here's my quarterly planning, here's my weekly planning, here's how I'm going through this, every week. But it's not something I want to hand to you because it's so personal to me. I wouldn't just give you this dashboard and go like, use this, because it could be a little insane if you don't know what it is and why it ended up that way. But that's why I'm suggesting potentially a physical, even if you use digital media, a physical project tracker to help you stay on track. Now, the project tracker could be for either for a backwards planned project with an end date, or it can be for a practice. You know, you can, but they're not the same tracker, right? I have a practices tracker and I have a projects tracker. Like I have the two things separately because they're different styles. So if your main focus is a habit, then you can use a habit tracker of some kind. And I have people who have done this very physically, like literally taking, you know, a marble from one jar and putting it in another jar, like when you do the thing. Or it can be, you know, a star chart, like I did it today, put a star on the wall. You know, it can be, and it can be digital too. Like there's Habitica, there's other kinds of like apps that are like habit tracking apps. There's one where you grow trees. I forget what it's called. You know, like if that motivates you, if you enjoy that, that's fine too. Those are all habit based, and your habit can be spend an hour on my creative project, moving an outcome-based project forward. It has no deadline at all, but I'm going to continue moving forward with steps on this project. So Jess, again, your example of working on your book, the type of work you're going to do over time changes, but you're like showing up for your book for an hour, 90 minutes, whatever it is, twice a week. Check, check, boom, done, right? And you can also have a thing which is like, I finished chapter 1. You know, you can have that kind of project tracker as well. But the more important thing is that you're moving along, you know, that you're keeping up with just checking in and doing the thing. So I'm going to leave up to you what you want to do as far, like what would serve you best as far as a project tracker. If you love digital tools and you want to use something like Asana or whatever, you know, cool. Like if you have like because they have project views, you know, ClickUp, whatever, there's like project views and you can like check off stuff in the project. That's how I run projects internally. That's what I do. I have Notion, I have a project page. I can see the stuff in there. It is a tracker of a kind. I'm open to options. Like you can do what you want. But that's what the assignment is. And I really, the main thing to look at and the main thing to like kind of have front of mind as you work on it is the difficulty of connecting your daily actions to this larger plan, larger goal. Because that's the biggest thing that happens is that when you have you're like task, oh my God, I did all the things, I got them all on the list. And then that's all you end up doing. And you don't end up doing this stuff that moves the needle, that's really important to you. So that's my goal for you. That's why I made this a milestone for the program, is like figuring out some way to test. May not work great. You can try it, see how it goes. I want you to try it for 2 months and see how this works out. So floor is open. Questions? Yeah.
So I made my project tracker in ClickUp. It's very much like Notion where you can actually.
Mhm.
But what was interesting, you said that something on a physical, sort of like paper, basically. And I actually work with both in the sense like I keep planner right next to me when I'm working because I don't want to interrupt and put things in ClickUp while I'm working. I just note it down there and also my appointments and that.
Mhm.
So what is the advantage of paper versus digital? Have you
I mean, I
found?
think there's evidence, there's, research showing that people like their brain chemistry is different when they're using their hand and paper than when they're using digital tools.
Right.
I think that's there. I think that's a and for a lot of people I work with, digital tools just are like they just cannot, it does not speak to them. For
Right.
me, I couldn't do it kind of any other way because I'm managing so many complex like
Right.
streams of information. And I've built all these ways to interrelate these databases so that I see everything where I need to see it. I do sometimes have a physical tracker when I'm like, this project is breaking my brain and I'm not keeping it. And it's just a checklist on my desk. Like, it's just like, here are the things that are coming. That's what it looks like. It's not fancy. It's not designed or whatever. It's just like something I can like, okay, that's where I'm at. Okay. Kind of reorient myself. I think there's an advantage for some people, especially people with ADHD, they need something in front of them. They need to actually see it physically in their space often. And so if like I have a friend who has ADHD and she doesn't keep anything in her vegetable drawers because if it's in the drawer, she won't eat it. She forgets about it. So she like the drawers are empty and her vegetables and she's vegetarian. So like she only eats vegetables. Like the vegetables are like all in the shelves, not in the drawers. And when she said that to me, I was like, it just kind of clicked like a bunch of people I'd worked with where I was like, oh, that's what's going on there. You need to see a thing. So there's people I know who do time tracking who, again, they may not be diagnosed, but they have some level of that kind of neurodivergence. And they'll use there's a physical tool called Timular. And there's a couple different things where you can like, you name the different facets of this polyhedron and you can flip it to switch tasks and time track if that's important to be time tracking because they needed to know, so they did it. So there's reasons why you would want it physically in front of you. It's also can be very satisfying to like when again with these students, I would do a big whiteboard in front of my office and they would lay out their tasks on the whiteboard using index cards. And they were with magnets. And so you could move them, because I was like, it's not going to stay. Like you think it's going to go like this. It's not going to go like this. And so this needs to be flexible, right? Flexible container. But when they did something, we would go every day, every class once a week and stand in front of the board. And I'd be like, what'd you do? What happened? And they would be like, I did this. And they'd check it off. I did this. And then I'd give them a sticker. And they were like, oh, these are almost adults, right? Basically adults. But they were just like, oh my gosh, that was so fun. Like I want to start. No, wait, I want a unicorn. Like they want the stickers. So like, don't underestimate the value of physically rewarding yourself with something. Yeah. Other questions or comments here?
I use both digital and handwritten trackers. I think that there's benefits to both.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, I really empathize with the physical tracker people, but I am not that person. And I
well, I mean,
I know
yeah,
there's both.
I'm sure a lot of you are the same way. You work in different locations. You are in different locations during the day. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to have something digital, something that you can pull up on your phone. But at the same time, man, when I finish a task or complete a project and it's in my digital system and it's all checked off, it's marked completed, it disappears into the digital ether, And I don't know, there's something really satisfying about working through my, my like bullet journal style daily to-do list.
For
And then
sure.
it's, a few months worth of work to get through one of these journals. And then the journal is complete. And I have this physical thing in my hands that represents all of this work that I've done.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah.
think that's right. I mean, that's why I recommend having like when you choose your one project, having a pre-committing to a celebration, like when you hit these milestones, so you can mark it and go like, I really did something. And one of the
Yeah.
things I did is in my weekly tracker, I have a view of completed tasks. So like I don't look at it every day, but at the end of the week, I can see like there's a table of like the things that got checked off digitally that were completed that week. And I go like, oh, we did all this stuff. Um, and so that helps me kind of appreciate all that stuff. But yes, also like when I'm making my physical notes on my desk, I love throwing them away, actually. I love like being done and being like, okay, that's been on my desk for a month. Now it's gone. No more. So um
Well,
yeah.
I'm trying to experiment with something in Notion for this project tracker. Um, and I'm curious to see for myself what the result of it is, but I use Notion for project tracking and task management too. And I have a projects database and then I have a tasks database. And on projects, I embed the task database
Mhm.
on the project page, filtered to the tasks only related to that project.
Mhm.
So they work together, and it's a great system. My team's been using it for years. But then the project that I'm working on right now in Momentum System is part of a bigger project. So my project that I built the tracker for is to create a lead magnet for my personal brand, which is part of the bigger project of building a personal brand.
Mhm.
So what I did is I created a task for create lead magnet for personal brand. And then I built just a very simple table on the page, which is not part of a database. It's just a simple table, but it has the stage, it has the action task, and then it has a column for, instead of date like you would have in a database, a reminder. So in Notion, you can, at mention,
Yeah.
at remind Monday, 9 p.m.
Mhm.
So that I have the reminder set in the column. So it's not going to show up on a calendar anywhere, but it's very simple. And I'm only setting the reminders for the next task. Which if you want me to show you, I can show you what I've got so far.
Sure. Yeah. Let me hang on a second. Okay, that should work.
And what I'm hoping, oh, no, I don't want to react. I want to
So the
share.
thing I'm going to say as you're getting ready to share there is that the Notion problem with that is that potentially you're not actually allowing space for these tasks to happen in your day if they're not visible within your task list.
So this task is visible.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
In my
Then yes,
daily.
essentially you have kind of like, we're just moving along here. Yeah.
Yep. And then when I open it up, I have this on the page, and this
Uh-huh.
tells me, every day what I am going to be working on, what piece of the puzzle I'm going to be working on and when.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that's done, I'll set a reminder for the next step when I'm going to be working on that.
Mm-hmm.
And my hope is to keep this simple, but also I'm a writer. Like
Mhm.
writing a lead magnet, that is like falling off a log for me. But when I took the step from Creative Focus Workshop to Backward Plan and really break it down into steps, it's like, oh my gosh, actually there's a lot more involved than just writing a lead magnet. There's a lot of pieces
Mhm.
that needed to get written down and then planned out as I go.
Mhm.
So this was really helpful for just seeing all of the pieces that actually needed to be done,
Mhm.
and pre-forgiving myself, as you put it, for sometimes needing to move some of the pieces around.
Mhm.
Instead of just having this task on my list, create a lead magnet, for a month and feeling like it's just this thing that's just always hovering there. And
Right. It's a project that looks like a task.
yeah,
Yeah. And this is the way you're doing this is similar to how I end up doing things sometimes, where I call it a task, but it's actually a small project.
yes.
And inside the task, there's stuff. There's like a list, there's a checklist. And
Mhm.
my
That's
assistant
what this is.
really loves to work with a checklist more than anything else. So
Yeah.
just
Yes.
using like check boxes is like
Yep.
the best. So
And I will check things off as I go.
yeah, exactly. There you
I don't
go.
have this done yet, but that's probably what that's going to look like.
Uh-huh.
So I have the visual representation of what I've done, and I can see all the pieces that still need to be done. So
Yeah. This is
yeah.
something that, like, creating any asset for a company is so complex. Like, there's so many parts to it. And so I've gone through and done kind of this, but like is a generalized list. I'm like, what are the parts that go into a lead magnet? It's like you have the landing page, you have the form, you have the this, you have the that, like all these different parts you have to create
Mhm.
aside from the actual content itself. So people are always like, oh, why don't you just throw this other offer out? And I'm like, because this that need to happen in order for that to happen. So yeah, good for you. Yeah. Lisbeth.
Yeah, I've worked with different project packages and milestones, and often in research projects, you have these milestones, you have these EU projects there. Somebody is integrating all this stuff and setting up this structure. And
Mhm.
this is for me, this is just the hardest part. I mean, this is where I've burnt out, I think, in the last 5 years, figuring out how to do it for myself and manage stuff. Even though I've written a PhD and books and everything, it's like somehow breaking it down and doing it by myself, it feels very different. So to be my own project leader and to do this, so I'm still suffering from feeling like I'm a failure at both the digital stuff and the analog stuff because I started with good intentions and then I don't know, it
I
just
mean, I
kind
think
of
we need to start with laying out your good intentions. What are the intentions? Like, what are you trying to do?
yeah,
And make a note of that. Like, write down why am I creating the system? What's it for?
yeah.
What do I want to do? Like, what are the parts I need to manage? What are the outcomes that need to come out of this?
Hmm.
You know?
And is there like a system of like questions? I
Well,
mean,
this is the four part, it's kind of like the four part,
okay,
thing that I just went over with task management, which is in that lesson.
okay, great, great.
But you can apply this to any system. And essentially it's like, what am I trying to do here? What
Yeah.
am I doing now? What's not working? What
Mm.
is working? What do I want to improve? What am I going to try? So you're sort of going through this list of questions, but the thing I'm emphasizing here that's maybe not emphasized as strongly as it could be in the lesson is start with what am I trying to achieve? Like, what
Mm.
is this for? There's such a temptation, especially when like see an ad for some miracles, AI, whatever, project management, blah, 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 that like
Yeah.
you go, oh, this is going to solve my life. I just get this thing and I just,
Mm.
put it in and boom, boom, boom. But like the problem is that if you don't know what you're trying to do, you cannot engage with this effectively.
Yeah. And
So
I
let's
think
take an
that's
example. Let's take a specific example. What is something you're trying to organize right now as a project?
uh, making prints and
Making
making,
prints.
writing and printmaking, basically.
Writing and printmaking as one project or two different projects?
Well, combined. And that's also what confuses me
Okay, so
because,
it's a project that includes writing and includes printmaking.
yes.
Okay, so if you think about like in terms of keeping track of this project, what's your mission? What do you want to keep track of?
Uh, yeah, that's that thing. Well, I want to keep track of my energy in doing it. And I have I
Mhm.
think a certain formative period that I have to get through that is kind of bumpy for me. I mean, there's some
Yeah,
bumps
sure.
up.
You need to really like do the conceptual work to
Right.
prepare what you're going to do. So basically, that's a stage of work. That I talk
Right.
about that in the project path where I say everybody underestimates scoping and drafting, which is essentially the phase
Thank
you're
you.
talking
That's
about.
exactly it.
That
Scoping and
there's a
drafting,
phase of work, which is
literally.
scoping and drafting. Scoping first, then drafting, and then probably going back to scoping and back to draft. Like you go back and forth for a bit until you're like, this is what I'm actually doing.
Yeah.
That's a phase of work. And basically, the only thing you need to do in that phase of work is have quota task chunks of time to work on it. And maybe
Mm.
there's a list of things, like, for example, in this project, you may have source material you need to review,
Yeah.
notes you need to put together. Maybe you need to find the notes. Like there's
Right.
tasks that go
Right.
with scoping and drafting.
Okay. So which tasks?
So
Like I
as
have
you,
archives that I have to put in order. I have
right,
some kind
you
of
got
project description, 5 to 10 pages. I have
So
people that
every
I
time you think of a thing like that, write it down. Like go do the archives, project description, 5 to 10 pages. Those are all things that need to go onto a list. Like you brain dump all the things that are like, here's all the stuff that I know I need to do at some point.
Mm.
Then you're dividing it into chunks. You're dividing it into this is scoping and drafting. This is executing on the plan. So in this case, it's making prints and also writing. So there's two different parts of that plan. Then you're going to be doing revision and polishing. Then you're going to be releasing it somehow, right?
Yeah.
So those are the
Right.
main phases of almost any project.
Right.
some version of that. And so you brain dump all the things that are in your head, because clearly as soon as you start thinking about this, you're like, but this, but that, but this, but that, write them all down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then assign them to a phase.
Okay.
Once you do that, all you need to do is look at the phase you're in.
Hmm. I
Anytime
think
you
I
come
get
up with
stuck on
something,
that,
you're like, well, what
how
about
am I going to
this?
do it? Or, when am I going to do it? And I
That's
don't
a
really,
different issue. So
Yeah.
just in terms of like the first piece of this, the project path itself is just what do I need to do and what phase is it in? What order do these things need to happen in? And so if you have those 5 big buckets, you're putting things in these 5 big buckets. And then as you think of something else, you're tossing it in a bucket. So like you're working on the scoping and drafting, you're like, oh, I'm going to have to do this. Put it where it belongs in a pile. You don't need to worry about organizing the pile until you get to that phase.
Mm.
Right? So you just have a place which is like thinking about how are you going to release this to the world. You don't
Right.
need to think about that right now. It's not important. But if you have a thought about it, you can put it in that pile so you don't forget it and you don't have to think about it again. So that's step 1 is like brain dumping all the parts,
Mm.
laying out these big pieces, right? That's the overall arc of the project, which is essentially the project path. But then putting it into a flexible container means integrating it with your actions and what you're doing. So in your case, probably this means you are assigning it chunks of time in your week.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah.
And whenever those times come, you open up this document. If it's it could just be a Google Doc, whatever, just a list,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you go,
Yeah.
what's next on the list? Archive sorting. Okay, I'm doing that. That's it. So it basically ends up looking like Jess's list. Her list is for a much smaller project than yours is, but it's just a list of things in order. And you spend, 90 minutes on this and then you're done. And then on Thursday, you spend 90 minutes on this and then you're done. And if you start finding yourself getting stuck in the sort of research phase and not moving on, then you need to, in your weekly review, go like, okay, I spent a lot of time on this research. I am actually ready to start putting some drafting stuff together. Doesn't mean I stop researching, but I'm going to be doing that. So then you're alternating or something. You know what I mean? So you take a strategic moment to go like, okay, where am I at in this project? Do I need to be moving on to a future bit of it? Am I getting stuck? And if I am, what actions am I going to take? And then you just change up kind of what is in those containers of time.
And the containers of time, I think that's where I also have issues, because to sit down and say and translate it into some kind of calendar. I often use the digital calendar, and then I'm now doing the top 3, and it's like, okay, what did I actually, then I have these post-it notes, I'm starting to like move them around.
Yeah, well, what I'm suggesting here is that you avoid as much as possible putting any deadlines on anything, that you just are moving on this. You're just moving it forward. That's it. So it doesn't have to be complex. You need to figure out when in your week you can do it, but then you don't need to give yourself like do this specific thing for this specific amount of time and it's due at the end of the 90 minutes, boom, and if I didn't do it, I fail. It's like, I'm going to spend this time on the thing at that period of the day, and that's it. I'm going to move on. I have my list. I just go back to my list. That's it. I don't need a Post-it note. I have a list. I have a thing that I can go back to.
I think I've been very output oriented for years.
Yes.
Right?
So have we all. So have we all.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, you will make output. Like this will get you to output. But what you're doing right now is letting the sort of inner voices saying like, you need to have this output, like swamp the actual actions.
Yep.
And what's the point, right? So again, the thing I would suggest to you today is if you have Post-it notes around, you got stuff on your calendar, take it all off, put it all in one nice list and divide it up by the phase that you're in. Just do that. That's your project path. That's it. You can do it on paper if that makes you happy. Do Google Doc. It doesn't make any difference, but like have it all in one place. If you have more thoughts about it, put it there. Like that's your discipline. That's the grit, is like put it in that same place. Don't let yourself put it somewhere else or put it on your calendar or whatever. Then as the week goes on, when you have time for it, you just look at the thing that's in front of you. You have these opportunities, weekly, quarterly, whatever, to look at the project as a whole and say, like, do I need to be reassessing this and like put it like moving to a new thing or starting something else or whatever it is, or are we good here?
Yeah.
And I just keep going. You know, you have these opportunities to reassess it, but in the moment when you sit down to do it, don't think about it. Just do the next thing on the list.
Then it's like studio time, basically, you know, right?
Studio time. And studio time, you'd have a list. You're like, this is my next thing. I know what I'm working on in studio time. And especially if you're working on the same thing multiple days, it's all set up for you.
Yeah. Thank you. That calmed me right down. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
good.
I hope I'm not the only one who's like going through all kinds of, yeah.
All right, we're going to run out of time in a few minutes. Any other questions or comments before we move on here? Okay. The one thing I want to challenge you all with, because I mentioned this all to you when we did our road mapping, is contingency planning. We are heading into a rough season, as I said, like in my family, you know, all the holidays and stuff. It's fun, but it's a lot. I want everybody to think about one disruption you can predict with 90% plus certainty will pop up within the next 3 months. Think of one thing and then make a plan. What will you do when that happens? It could be something, you know, somebody's going to get a cold because it's, you know, winter and like that happens. Or it could be somebody invites me to a last minute party. You know, sure, like it could be good, bad, doesn't matter. The point is that it's, you know, unpredictable.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is there a due date, so to speak, for the project tracker for getting that to you?
You are supposed to use the project tracker for 2 months.
Okay,
That is what's due by
got
the
it.
end of January. So
Okay.
it's beginning of November. So that working backwards, you need to get it done by the end of November at the latest.
Got it.
By the end of our active meetings, because you will still be in the, you know, you still be in the Creative Focus workshop for at least 2 more months unless you renew and stay for longer. But this, you know, weekly meetings will end at the end of January. You have to have a 2-month tracker by then.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. And just one thing I want to say, Jess, lots of empathy for what you're going through this week. I'm really, really sorry to hear it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's full on lead generation business development mode over here. So everybody, my primary business, I work with technology companies. I'm a copywriter for tech, and it's been a rough week in tech. Another round of massive layoffs. I think a lot of people are kind of holding their breath with the election. Lost 2 big clients last week, so it's kind of panic mode over here.
Okay.
Well, if there's any way we can help, I don't know what it would be, but we would, I'm sure, be happy to help in any way.
You know anybody who needs a copywriter?
I will absolutely, absolutely keep you front of mind for that.
Thank you. My team and I are very good at what we do. Very, very good.
I'm sure. Yes. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. Next week is an open call. So, you know, bring any questions or things you want to discuss then. And then the week after that, we will be doing the reflect phase. And yeah, so looking forward to it. And I'll see you then.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.